So, hey YouTube, this is it's me Fawn. I want to finish on the blog that I was just doing about good versus God, and one of the things that I didn't get a chance to also talk about was the blame game. And what I mean by that is a lot of times there are situations or decisions that we make in our lives, and we immediately like to blame others um, for those decisions instead of us taking responsibility for the decisions that we make. I feel like when we're not walking in Christ, that the the answers or the outcomes that we get from the decisions that we make are just quintessentially like rolling craps. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's a possibility. You got a 50-50 chance of it coming out in your favor, the way that you want it to. And so you're hoping, that the odds are working in your favor, but that's not always the case. And that's not always how it will be. And, a lot of times, oftentimes, what happens is when you are out of Christ and things continuously begin to not work for you, you or a person does what I say, play the blame game. And what I mean by that is they'll always make themselves the victim. They'll always make themselves the martyr. And they'll say, well, I'm always there for everybody. And I've always been the one to carry the shoulders for everyone. And I've always been the one to, do X, Y, and Z. And nobody's ever there for me when I need them. And nobody, whenever I call on people, nobody's there to help me. But I'm always there to help other people, and et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? The factor or the missing link within those statements are your personal responsibility. It is your responsibility to make better decisions about the people that you surround yourself around. It is your responsibility to make the best decisions about um, where you're going and what you're doing in your life. We have to take responsibility for the things that happen to us and not be continue to play the victim in everything that's going down. I think about my life in specifics, not specifically, but I think about my life in specific and how the various relationships that I've been in my life, and how a lot of times in those relationships I always thought that God was the wrong one when he used up all my money, or like I can use a immediate situation. My son's father, he left me with a 3-month-old child. And before, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm so sorry for you, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I knew who I was dealing with before I had that child with him. And that's what I mean by taking responsibility. We oftentimes want to you know play a pity party for ourselves and say, oh, I was sticking it out because I was hoping this person would turn out to be a better person, or I would do this, or I would do that. When a lot of times we know people reveal themselves to you, and you continue to stick in it for whatever your reasoning is. And I continued to stay in that relationship with my son's father for whatever reason, and for my own reasons, I continued to stay in that relationship with him. And I knew that he wasn't a responsible man, because we had been involved for 7 years before we had our child. So, I knew that he wasn't a responsible man. He gave me clues the whole time. But I chose to see what I want to see, and I chose to accept the relationship for what was being given to me at that time. And I guess I felt that it was fitting what I needed in my life at that time and how I wanted it to be. But forsaking all other things instead of me, stepping up and just, living the way that I know that God was calling me to do, and stop playing house, so to speak, but that's not what I did. So ultimately, in the end, a man and a woman, living together for, a period of time, and if unless somebody's sterile and or you're using protection, a child is going to come out of that situation. So, it is what it is. A child came out of our situation. We, with that, and So I could not be shocked. I can't say that I was shocked when he left us. I was disappointed, highly disappointed that he left us and left me with a 3 month old. But I can't say that I was shocked. And that's what I mean by taking responsibility. I had to step up and take responsibility for the actions that and the decisions that I made by being involved with this particular man. Now, do I have a beautiful son and a wonderful son at the circumstance? Yes, I do. But do I still have consequences because of that decision? Yes, I do. So that's what I meant in my last video when I said that just because you've given your life to Christ, it no longer you no longer will continue to go through, the challenges or the consequences. You no longer will get the consequences of the decisions that you make before you were in Christ. And I think a lot of times we, as Christians, think that we can play God, that that we can have one foot in and one foot out, and then and we always like to do a measurement and saying, well, my life is okay as long as I'm not doing that, or as long as I'm not doing this, or at least I'm not on the street hooking, or at least I'm not selling drugs, or at least I'm not doing drugs, or whatever the case may be. We always have to use measurements and compare ourselves and say that at least we're not as bad as the next person for whatever sin that we have going on in our lives. When God tells us sin is sin, there's no scales of justice when it comes to Christ. It is what it is. Sin is sin. One sin is no greater than the other sin. Homosexuality is no better than an adulterous person. An adulterous person is no better than a liar. A liar is no better than someone who's gluttonous. The gluttonous person is no better than a thief. All of it, as you continue to walk down that road, all of it is the same. It's all equal at the end of the day. And if you haven't repented for it, and if you haven't truly asked God to come into your life, and you have truly turned your direction for what you want to do, then you're going to experience the consequences of those decisions that you make. And we need to stop doing our little footsie measurement and saying that, well, as long as I don't do this, because, I don't do that. It's God doesn't look at us in that way. And when you continue to do that, know that you're going to experience repercussions because of those decisions. So that's what I'm saying, that it comes a time as a Christian, if you really, really want to grow in your walk and you really are serious about your walk, you begin to be more responsible with the decisions that you make. You begin to think, well, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't listen to that song. Maybe I shouldn't look at that show on television. Maybe I shouldn't read that particular book. Maybe I shouldn't go to that particular website. Maybe I shouldn't, associate myself with those particular people. And it's not saying that you think that you're better than anyone. It's because you have realized that there are certain things in your life that you particularly don't need to be involved in, because you know that that particular thing may corrupt you to do things that you should not be doing. So each person needs to ask themselves, what is it that I need to walk away from? Everyone is not the same, and everyone doesn't have the same cross. Everyone doesn't have the same struggle. So you have to ask yourself. So, I want people to realize that, your walk in Christ is a very serious decision, and it's a very serious journey, and it's a lifestyle. Just like people say, it's a lifestyle and it's a life choice, and you need to be serious about what you're going to do. Don't play with it, because people who are not in Christ see everything that you do. Even when you're not around other people, trust and believe the things that you do at home will eventually come to light. And it's not some cliche or anything like that. It definitely will come out. So, be serious about what you're going to do and what direction that you're going to go. And just ask God to give you that strength so you can make those better decisions and take responsibility for the decisions in your life, so you can experience the best and most peace that you have, and experience all of God's love that He has for you. So I encourage you all, and if you have any questions, just write me in. We'll talk further about it. Have a fantastic evening, and be blessed in all that you do.